All right, everybody, welcome back to another ATB NFL live show. One of the last ones of the season, at least the main season going on. Then we'll have some time in between for the Super Bowl, but championship weekend. Tony, and right now it's just Tony joining us, guys. Zach might be here a little bit later. Here he's moving. Luckily for him, if one of the ATB guys are watching, you'll know what his situation is. So we're happy to have him, even if he's late. Happy to have him on later. But Tony, again, it's championship weekend. Unfortunately, it is not featuring any of our teams. Zach included if he was here. As you pointed out, you expected to happen. So, unfortunately, you were right, but also wrong, right?
No. That's what you guys were saying last week, like the emotional hedge. It doesn't exist.
Yeah,
I am still
it
not a
doesn't.
happy person,
I
despite
know you
getting it
shouldn't
right
be.
last week.
You definitely shouldn't be. So I don't blame you. But hey, I mean, made it farther than either of us did. So yeah, there's that much at least. But yeah, definitely gonna be interesting to see the offseason with you guys and some other teams that have lost in the playoffs this year too. But let's talk about some other situations around the league first before we get into the games themselves. Head coach openings, right? Only two left since the show, four hirings. So we've got a lot of the openings taken care of at this point. And there's a couple of big surprises there. Some not so much. Some are more definitely what we expected to happen. We'll start actually with the one that was probably the most expected of the hires that we got. Jim Harbaugh officially announced as the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. This one I have some mixed feelings about for a couple different reasons, but this is kind of what we expected if Harbaugh was going to come back to the NFL. Felt like the Chargers had the most interest, were looking the most, especially once the Raiders decided on Antonio Pierce. It kind of felt like that was the move for the Chargers.
Yeah, it. This was kind of the one that everybody saw a mile away. Like even mid-season, people were
Yeah.
talking about the match potentially happening. Going to be really cool to see him with Justin Herbert. Like Harbaugh's had a lot of success everywhere he's gone, but he hasn't had a true stud at quarterback since Andrew Luck. So it'll be interesting to see how his methodologies have shifted since that time. There are some concerns about a guy who hasn't been in the league in 10 years.
Yeah.
I saw it just today announced that the defensive coordinator. Well, shoot, I'm blanking on his name right now.
I'm trying to remember
This is
myself.
embarrassing. Well, either way, the Michigan defensive coordinator is following him to Los Angeles. Jesse
Oh,
Minter.
right.
It is
Right.
Jesse
Minter,
Minter. That is the
Minter,
name.
Minter.
Got there
Yep.
eventually.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great hire. I'm excited for what it means for Michigan because hopefully that means they take a step back. But overall, like my biggest question is, does he still have it in the NFL just because like he's used to dealing with college players that he only has to deal with for 4 years at a time? NFL is a bit different, and he has a history of rubbing people the wrong way and ugly exits after a round 4 year cycle. I personally don't feel too worried about that, but it's definitely worth acknowledging. I think he's going to have Herbert. He's going to have a chance to rebuild this thing from the ground up. They don't even have a GM yet, so you know he's going to be in control of things. So the next 4 or 5 years are going to be great. Who knows if it goes on longer beyond that? But overall, I'm just happy for Herbert. You know that he's really going to have a chance to compete now, whereas previous coaches weren't really giving him that option.
Yeah, I think the funny thing about and the reason why I'm not again, so I'm not so much worried about the hire very much. It's just I know there's a chance of something happening that I think would be extremely funny. And I've seen a couple people talk about this, and it's the fact that I think, like you said, they're going to have more success on the field overall and in the win column than they've had at any point while Justin Herbert's been there. But I think he's going to do less than ever and be praised more than ever, despite not being as big of a reason why they are even afloat. That's what I think is going to be funny because there's going to be people who come out of the woodwork and say, "Oh, Justin Herbert, he won 12 games this year and he did all this stuff, but he throws like for career low in yards, possibly because maybe they lean on the run game with him there or whatever it is. And he's efficient, but he doesn't put up the crazy numbers he's been putting up. And people all of a sudden are going to say, oh man, now he's good. It's like, no, guys, he's been good. You just don't care when guys are good. You care when the wins come up and you care who matters the most for those wins. And you think it's him and you think it's the reason they lose, but it's not. And I just know that conversation's coming. I think it's going to be very funny, right? We see this all the time with quarterbacks. It's like, oh, like with Matt Stafford when he went to the Rams. Now all of a sudden he's a winner. He's this great quarterback. Did you see him play before he went to the Rams? He wasn't a different quarterback. Yeah, was on a different football team. Like it's just how this goes, right?
Yeah, I tend to just try not to interact with people who have
Yeah,
such simple opinions.
I know. It's just funny. It's like I know it's coming. I can't wait for Twitter next year during the season whenever they're like whatever their record is if they're playing really well. And Herbert's like, he's doing good, but he's not really like having to carry the team. And it's like, oh, now he's better. It's like he's not better. He just has a better team and a better coach. I don't.
I'm hopeful that I have done a great job muting anybody of like
Right.
just of that type of brain, so I don't have to see that stuff anymore. It's great for the football experience.
Fair enough. Yeah. So the next one that I was a little bit surprised by, but not so much because I don't like the hire at all. I really like the hire, but because it just felt like this was where kind of the biggest fish on the market was going to go. Falcons go Raheem Morris, bring him back after being the interim coach a couple years ago, deciding to go with Arthur Smith instead of him, of course, which led to him being the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams the last few years. He comes back to the Falcons, and it's not Bill Belichick after a lot of speculation about that. And really, the only place that Bill was kind of focusing on, it seemed like, or the only team that was focused on Bill. And now it's Raheem Morris instead. So that does open up the possibility, we'll talk about a little bit later, that Bill Belichick might not be coaching in the NFL in 2024.
That seems pretty much guaranteed. He hasn't
Yeah,
talked to the Seahawks. I don't think he's
that would
talked
make a lot
to.
of sense to me. Yeah,
Yeah, I know. But overall, like I understand why the Falcons chose not to go with Bill, and
right.
because they went with Raheem Morris, I understand it even more
Mm-hmm.
because it's very clear now that they want to compete, right? Like, and Bill Belichick is really appetizing, but he is a 2-year guy, right? Like a 2-3 year guy max. He wants the
Right.
wins record. He wants to try to fight for another championship. He also it sounds like he was wanting to bring like his people with him, and we saw that might be a bit outdated at this point. We're already
Yeah.
seeing Gerard Mayo go outside the tree for all of his interviews and stuff. So like,
Mm-hmm.
I I understand going with the guy who you feel could be your coach for 20 years. Like it makes sense that they wanted a more long term vision.
Right.
And Raheem Morris, I don't think you can find anybody in football circles that could say a single bad thing about him. It seems like everybody you talk to, even like people that you don't associate with like the tree that he has come from, like Mike Tomlin's out there saying he's the
Yes.
best coach he's ever been around.
Yeah,
Like,
Mike has a lot of good things to say about Raheem for sure.
and like every player who's ever been around him says these things. He's very well connected to the Shanahan McVay tree, but he's also not like overly committed to it. So you just expect that this is a guy who is always going to do what he believes is right and always going to challenge what is right so that he continues to improve. And like, he's been a head coach before, and it was like almost 15 years ago, and it was a 3-year stint, and he was young as hell. I'm sure he learned a ton. He's been an interim head coach for the very team that he's now the head coach for,
And did a good job there doing
he's
that too.
coached offense, he's coached defense. It's just, he is a football coach, and he is also one of the brighter minds in, like, just been around all the brightest minds schematically on both sides of the ball. So really, really exciting hire for the Falcons. Love the direction that it sets for their franchise. And yeah, Bill Belichick probably not going to be coaching anywhere this upcoming season. We'll see if he takes a year off and wants to reattack next offseason, but when the Cowboys job opens up. But,
Right.
but it could
Yeah.
also just be like, a year off at 72 might just be the writing on the wall.
Maybe, yeah. Well, that's my thing is with Belichick for a second. Like, I do think if he doesn't get one of the last two jobs, which I don't expect to happen, like we said, like we'll talk about them briefly, but I don't expect that it's going to happen.
This is embarrassing. Can you fill me in on the second? Like, I am blanking
Oh,
on
Commanders.
That's the one. I
Yeah.
just have Ben Johnson in.
I know that's
with
exactly
them, so I
that's
keep forgetting that's even an opening.
that's my whole thing. Yeah, it's like I think that we at least one coach is pretty much guaranteed to get a job still, and there's others that are also very much in line for jobs, and Bill does not seem to be one of them. But back with Morris for a second, you talked about his connections to the Shanahan McVay tree, and I think the important part of that is in the NFC especially. If you want to be able to get anywhere beyond the first round, beyond the second round, even right, because we saw the Bucks were able to get kind of close to that, and the NFC South, like in general, just isn't very close to some of these other divisions right now, talent wise. You need somebody who at least has a puncher's chance against these offensive schemes, who understands them enough to be able to take some of the stuff away that other teams just can't take away. This is the guy for that. If there's a guy in the league you can go to and say, hey, can you dial something up here? Can you get me a stop on the Niners or the Rams? This is the guy that, given the talent, and I think that this defense, what it showed this past year, they have a lot of talent. They still need to add some stuff. They could still use some more edge help and things like that. But overall, they have the talent to compete as a defense against some of these top offenses with a guy like him calling the shots, right? So this is really important, I think, for them. I think it's going to give them a really nice floor. I mean, people hate when people say that, but I do think it gives them a baseline of competitiveness that they just haven't had for the last few years under Arthur Smith. And there's upside there. I really do, especially if he gets the offensive coaching right, which I think he will. I've heard
Yeah,
some
I
Josh
saw
Adams
Zach
conversations.
Robinson is the
Yeah,
focus right now.
which unfortunately the Steelers were interested in him, but whatever. I'm not going to hold it against him. But basically, I think if he gets the offensive coaching side right, if he can get the quarterback right, which that's a big part of it too. Now they did apparently also interview the co-offensive coordinator of LSU, which kind of leads me to
I saw
believe
that. Yeah.
they may be interested in a certain quarterback. But
If the
we'll
Patriots are
you
not
know,
locked in on Jaden
yeah.
Dan, or like if they go Marvin Harrison, then I think
Mm-hmm.
we see a move up to 4 pretty
Yeah,
quickly.
I think the Cardinals will pick up the phone if Harrison's on. I mean, there's some other great players that you could take it for, but I think they'll be on the phone if he's
Yeah,
still on the board, of course.
probably a
So
couple second round picks away,
might be able to do that. Yeah. So anyway, well, that's for another time. But so that
and
I
another
really
show
like
maybe.
that hire. Yeah, another show. Brian Callahan next up for the Titans. Now, I was kind of thinking it would be another offensive coordinator that did some really good things with a quarterback that maybe wasn't expected to be great. Now, this is a different situation. It was a backup quarterback for the Bengals, and there's a starting rookie quarterback for the Texans. But still, I was kind of thinking this could end up being Bobby Slowick. Maybe he does end up just, and good for him, probably having another year to work with Stroud, and he just stays put. That was probably the best thing for both sides, honestly. But now we get Callahan, who's been the offensive coordinator for 5 years under Zach Taylor. Taylor is considered kind of the main guy there, so maybe that was why it was a little bit of a surprise to some people. But Callahan has a really good resume and reputation, and I think that this hire is in the right direction for the Titans. I think they need to go this type of route.
Yeah, the thing I like about Callahan is, I mean, outside of the idea that he could potentially bring his dad along as the
Right. That's
offensive line
that's
coach,
that's the thing.
uh,
Yep.
the thing I really like about him is one, similar to Raheem Morris, players love him, but
Yes.
two, the story of the Bengals the past few years has just been them pivoting mid-season and finding answers
Yes.
to problems that exist. So like I don't love how much they start every season from a low point and
Yeah.
then figure
Yeah.
it out, but the fact that they are capable of figuring out each and every year and the answers are not the same each and every year,
Mm-hmm.
that tells me that he's a guy who's going to find answers. And like
Yes.
I don't know how analytically minded he is, but I do know how analytically minded the new ownership and leadership of the Titans is. So I have to assume he's in line with that and going to be more
At
in
least
play
enough. Yeah.
with their direction. So like I'm interested to see how it goes. Your guy JT O'Sullivan, he's very big on calling out these nepo hires as they happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, he is one of those guys who his
Yeah.
opportunity came because of his dad, but he has cut his teeth and he's earned it.
Yeah. I think he's done well. Like it is funny when JT does that, but like I get it why you do that. It helps just frame people's minds correctly about these guys.
It
But
should be called out, right? Like
yeah.
it's good to acknowledge just to so
Right.
everybody understands. But
Mm-hmm.
he is a coach who has earned this on his own,
Right.
and well, I'm cautiously optimistic. I don't think it's like a knockout hire, but
Yeah, I do think there's potential here, basically, is my thing. And I think that's what they needed. They needed something in the offensive direction, one to see if you can make Levis work, right? Because he showed flashes in a really bad situation offensively last year. Outside of obviously Henry and Spears, the running game was good, but the the protection and the blocking in general was certainly not so great. Pick 7 is probably going to be a big time tackle if we
Joe
assume at
Alt
this
right in the
point,
pen.
right? Exactly. So we hope that for Levis' sake and for their sake that he can do some of the stuff you talked about, finding answers to the test, right? I talk about that, something I reference a lot whenever an offensive coordinator or just someone who's in charge of the offense, when their main goal is, I want to give my offense every answer to the test of the defense possible. That's the type of guy that I look for, because sometimes in this league you're just going to get out talented at times, right? Like sometimes you're going to play a team that's more talented than you. Do you have a way to try to circumvent that and make yourself still actually palatable as an offense? That's something that the Bengals were able to do with the backup quarterback this year and some injuries across the board. So I think he's the right kind of guy for that, for sure. Last one here, and this one is a little bit surprising as well, mostly because I didn't know if he was going to be a candidate this year specifically. And I know he was getting interviews, so it makes sense. But also the Panthers, I assume they paid him a lot of money, and I know it's a 6 year
And a
deal.
6-year contract.
Yeah, which David Tepper loves his 6 year coach contracts. I think he did it with Rule too, if I'm not mistaken. But this one was a little bit surprised. No, I'm not saying it's a bad hire because I think it makes sense given the situation that they're in and what he just did with the quarterback for the Bucks. But Dave Canales, he is now the head coach of the Carolina Panthers on that huge deal. I'm hoping that this one has a little bit more of a chance of working out, but I know something you talked about, Tony, that you wanted them to do ideally was bring in someone with a little bit more experience who might be able to stand up to Tepper a little bit more. This I don't know if that's really the type of hire they went for. Obviously, he's the guy making the hire, so he probably doesn't want that anyway. But what do you think overall with that hire?
Yeah, I think it's an inspired hire. I wasn't so similar to how I felt about Slowick, and I was talking about that a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would like to see another year as a coordinator,
Me
considering
too.
it was
Me
his
too.
first year as a coordinator. But also, I understand why he got a gig where Slowick didn't. Just because the story with Slowick was like, oh, brand new offense. Like, look at how crazy it is that Stroud is doing this stuff. But like the offense itself wasn't like transcendent. Like
Right.
I don't know it was just another guy in the Shanahan tree, and he's going to get a job eventually, and he's probably going to be good. But there was nothing about Slowick that like made me think, oh yeah, he's got the juice. With Canales, just one being Pete Carroll's understudy for over a decade means that your personality it passed the check, right? Like
Right.
everybody knows that Pete is an all time vibes guy, and like
He is.
if you were able to hang out with him for a decade plus, then
Yeah.
you
You're
got it too.
probably. Yeah. You're
Um,
good.
and you hear the players talk about him, and that comes across very strong. Players
Mm-hmm.
love this guy, and on top of that, he took Geno Smith, who had been a probably not for all faults of his own, but he had been an afterthought for like 7-8 years, and
Yeah.
boom, instant resurgence. He's electric, getting him a contract. Their first year without Russell Wilson, and it's better. Like he was a big part of that, right? He was working with Shane Waldron on that
Yeah.
staff.
Those
Then
two for sure. Yeah.
then he goes to the Bucks, takes this OC job where like there were a lot of questions about the offensive line, right? Like you're shifting Tristan Wirfs over to the left side, you're plugging Gedeke. I say his name wrong every single time. Where's
Fine.
JT? He needs to correct me on this.
Right. Yeah.
But so like he's playing right tackle. You got uncertainty in the interior. Baker Mayfield, who was playing scout D line in Carolina last year, and put up a really really cool offense, an offense that evolved frequently, an offense that very clearly like cut stuff out when it saw that the personnel wasn't capable of it wasn't great for the personnel. So just overall, like I think that I understand why he gets the job, and just hearing people talk about him, I'm excited about him working with Bryce Young and really scraping the best out of him. I still think that they've got a long timeline just because of how depleted that roster is, and rookie head coach. There's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of adjusting to do, but overall, like I think I'm excited for the direction and the vision that this hire implies.
Yeah, again, I think that this was the right type of coach to bring in because your priority right now as a organization has to be to make Bryce Young work. And I think ultimately, again, I know how I felt about Bryce Young. I know how you felt about Bryce Young. You were certainly on the positive end of that right now, Tony. I'll definitely give you credit for that. I do still believe in him as a player, and
Yeah, I'm
I'm
rooting
not
for the
gonna
guy.
yeah, I'm not gonna count him out because people have to understand too, like would Stroud have been better for the Panthers than Young was this? Absolutely, he would have been better because he just showed his ability under pressure this year that he didn't show most of his career, except for the Georgia game. He just has more ability to do that, right? But the Panthers' offensive line might have been the worst at handling even one extra person on a blitz than I've ever seen in my entire life watching this game. Like they legitimately were helpless against any sort of pressure that was brought. That needs to change. That has to be priority number one for him as a head coach is how can I put five guys in front of Bryce Young who are not going to immediately give him zero chance to do anything, right? You factor in the offensive talent around him. Obviously, everything was about as bad as it possibly could be. I think that his scheme and what he's going to try to do will help that. but it still comes down to the GM, new GM Dan Morgan, who's promoted from his assistant job. His priority has to be finding somebody who can catch a football and separate, somebody who can block literally anybody at all. It has to be all about that this season. You have to build a foundation around him to show just to know within the next year or so, can he be the quarterback for this team? And if he can't, then at least. But I don't think right now they have any possibility of finding that out until they make huge sweeping changes. So hopefully Canales knows that. I'm sure he does. I'm sure that was a pitch from him. Is like, how am I going to make Bryce Young work? That had to be a lot of the conversation. But that takes care of our coaching situations, coaching hires so far. Again, there's 2 jobs left. We both believe Ben Johnson is going to get the Commander's job. That just makes the most sense. The Seattle job is more interesting. Dan Quinn is still, I think, a possibility there, which I would not really like that very much.
Yeah, what an uninspiring direction
uninspired.
that would be.
I also heard something about if Quinn goes there, I forget who it was, but there'd be either defensive or offensive coordinator that would pretty much be guaranteed. I forget. I'd have to double check that, but just the whole situation doesn't feel right to me if that's what happens. I still think a guy like McDonald, if he can conquer this Chiefs team and if you win the Super Bowl, like.
I need to pull up this list of Seahawks interviews because it's a short list.
I know,
the Falcons did their 14 name list, and I want to say the Seahawks have only gotten a couple names on there.
I think so.
If I spend too long trying to find this, I'll just
you're good.
Quit, but
no, you're good.
Maybe.
It is worth talking.
All right, yeah, I'm not seeing a list pop up on the Google machine that easily. So, but overall, like it does seem like they're not doing a ton of work on a lot of candidates. So it almost feels like they have something in mind. Right. And when you look what's out there, if they have something in mind, they would have made a move unless that guy is on an active coaching staff that is still playing. And so that I think you're spot on. Mike McDonald is probably it. I wouldn't be surprised if Todd Monken's on their list. I wouldn't be surprised if Ben Johnson's on their list, and I wouldn't be surprised if Aaron Glenn's on their list. All 4 of those guys,
because everybody, Aaron Glenn's getting interviewed by everybody. I noticed,
I know the Lions' defense isn't a inspired fear in the opponent kind of thing, but if you look at what they're doing with the personnel they have, it's interesting. I think it signals good coaching despite the results, and then also another guy that players just love. Aaron Glenn, I think it's he deserves a shot.
I think that's the bigger part of it is you can look at the results and say they aren't that great, but I do think he is a good coach. I think he's putting them in good positions a lot of the time. I think the guys just are not holding up their end of the bargain right now. And I can say, as someone who watched him in Pittsburgh and is currently watching for the Lions, Cam Sutton is not putting his best foot forward currently for that organization. So for Lions fans, I'm sorry, but also kind of I'm glad we didn't do it if this is how he's going to look. Not that we couldn't use him.
Right?
Yeah, 3 years. I think it's 3 years, 30-something million or whatever it was. I think it was $11 million a year. So
I don't know why I thought it was just a 1 year high value deal.
Chauncey Gardner Johnson is the 1 year deal that they have. Oh, then I think Emmanuel Mosley has a 1 year deal at corner.
Oh yeah, then did he tear his ACL or something too?
Last year, I don't know what his situation is right now off the top of my head, but yeah, their whole secondary needs definitely some overhaul. But we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Now. Again, so those are the openings right now that are left. We assume that it's going to be Ben Johnson plus any of the other guys in the playoffs. Probably are going to get one of those jobs. We'll see what happens from there. There's obviously a bunch of coordinator openings and stuff. We're not going to focus on that. Don't need to spend too much time on that right now. I already know I'm tired of trying to see who the Steelers are interviewing, and half the time, I don't even know if they're interviewing the guy or not. So we're just going to move on to the games, and we should have Zach here soon, hopefully. But for now, we're just going to jump into the first matchup here. What game do you want? I know that we could go in order, but what game do you want to start with, Tony? Because both of these games are, especially with the AFC game, but both these games are interesting.
So, it's interesting because let's go the order of the time slots. Yeah, let's go chronological. That's been working for us.
Yeah. Okay. So I did want to pull something up I found here. 1 second before we get into the games themselves. So obviously we have the AFC game first, which I think is interesting that the AFC game is first. I would have personally slotted that in the later time slot, for the potential of it. But
Yeah, but I mean, are you going to have a candlestick or a game in Santa Clara start at noon? Like,
I mean, I don't care about that. No, I get it. It makes sense for to have the time zone situation, yeah. But so yeah, Chiefs Ravens. Chiefs traveling to the Ravens. Ravens with number one seed, of course, this year. This game is so interesting to me because, and I've heard a lot of people talk about this throughout the week. This Ravens team, despite obviously Lamar's MVP first MVP season, they go like 15-2 and everything. Like that team though is not the same team that this one is. This is a more complete football team than that team was. They're really propped up by the play of Lamar Jackson and the fact that teams just were not ready to deal with an offense that was centered around the quarterback run game like that one was. There's a lot of games were just blowouts because teams just couldn't handle the offensive firepower of the Ravens team. They couldn't figure it out. And then obviously teams did a little bit more, and then they get bounced by the Titans that year. This is a different team. This is not one that you can. And I saw Taylor Lewan apparently on, I think it's Kay Adams' show, maybe is the one that he was on. He said that there's a formula to beating the Ravens, and you just got to go look at the 2019 Titans game. And I'm like,
that's racist.
Buddy, that was
just throwing that out there.
Oh, perfect timing, Zach. We're just about to get into the Chiefs Ravens game. So
what an appropriate label it's there.
Lamar's
oh my God! Wow, Zach, all-time entrance right there. Great job.
There we go. Yeah, it is Lamar's world.
Listen, so we were talking about Taylor Lewan. I was just bringing that up. I don't know if you saw what he said, Zach, about how on Kay Adams' show there's a formula to beating Lamar Jackson. And then after he said that, he went into like replies, was like, if you don't believe me, just go look at the 2019 Titans game. I'm like, Taylor, that was 5 years ago.
And the Michael Lombardi of formerly all right left tackles.
And like who was the coach? Was that Greg Roman at the time?
Oh, it would have been Greg. Yeah, his MVP season. Yeah, which again, great season, but not great.
Not like this year.
Game. Yeah. So basically, people are already trying to kind of discredit.
Oh yeah, I'm sure Bill Polian's out there somewhere peddling something.
I think he did actually say something not long ago, like earlier this year on some random podcast about it. I don't know, but basically, some people still seem to think that there is a formula to beating Lamar Jackson. Well, here's the problem. He might have right now in the NFL the scariest pocket I hate to say scary for pocket presence as a trade. The scariest pocket presence in the NFL.
Steadiest.
Because he will just stand there forever. Because his pass protection is usually pretty good. But if it's not, he'll stand there. Nice fun. And he will just literally wait for something to happen. And if it doesn't, he's just like, oh, I'll just go get 15 yards right now because I just can't. Like, I don't know because he was blitzed heavily by the Texans, right, in the first half of the playoff.
Like 60-something%.
Literally. Yeah. So they're just blitzing it. It was working for a little while. And then he's like, all right, if you're going to keep doing that, we have a counter. Me and Montaner have it. And then it was just guns a-blazing from that point on. And they get blown out. Like, if you're the Chiefs, I understand Spagnuolo is great, right? He's going to be able to come up with some pressure. It might work at times. Unless you bring 6, and this is something actually I saw on, if you guys are familiar with the Bootleg Football podcast, we talked about a couple times, like Brett Coleman, those guys. They talked about how against 4 and 5 man pressure, Lamar's pretty much about as good as it gets in the NFL against 4 and 5 man pressure. It's when you bring 6 that his numbers aren't that great, but it's bringing 6 guys, first of all. You cannot do that all game. At some point, they will just figure it out. That you can't bring 6 guys all day, all right? Like, if that's your answer defensively, it might get him a couple times, but it's not as simple as just play pass defense. Don't let it, like, that's what people want to say. Just play good pass defense. You'll be good. You can't, like, this is not the same offense it was.
And that's so much easier said than done. Like,
but like that's, I just wanted to point that out there. For those of you who think that all the Chiefs have to do is just keep him in the pocket, I promise you really don't want to do that too much because that's when this year he has been really hurting teams when he's been given time to just read the field and make throws.
Watch football. You won't be able to hold on to that opinion long.
I don't know. People don't want to watch.
I think people need to be more concerned about the fact that the Chiefs have 2 very, very severe injuries that could hamper their chances of having any chance of keeping us close.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that here shortly, but I want to throw it over to Tony.
I don't think
the
injured players would have helped enough either.
Yeah.
Tooney would.
Tooney's a big one. He is having him out. That's a huge one. But Tony, I just want to get because we have time to talk about these games in more depth. Just give me kind of like, what are your overall vibes of this game as we stand with a day left before the game ends?
So the reason that I wanted to go in chronological order, and the reason I was surprised to hear you say that you would have thought this should be the night game, is I think we get one close game tomorrow, and it's not this one. I get it. See, like Patrick Mahomes, he ran through the Dolphins, he ran through the Bills. It's not like the Dolphins game was like excellent Patrick Mahomes performance.
No,
the Bills game was, typical, like he just jumps into elite mode. All the receivers were catching all of the deep balls. Marquez Valdez-Scantling had like over 100 yards.
Yeah.
Those, like, that is an outlier when you look at the past 20 weeks, right? Like, that is not the Chiefs that we have seen. And I expect Mahomes to continue doing the things that he has done. I expect him to run a lot in this game. He'll have to. But overall, like, they are closer to the team that they have been this season than they are the team that plays against Buffalo. That like, you can throw those games out when you're trying to project forward. The Ravens, just stupid, historically good juggernaut. And, like, every single good team that they run into, they kind of shit pump. And the only games they've lost over the past 2 years were dramatic collapses in the final minute. Which, like, sure, if that's how this game goes, sure, fine. Mahomes is capable of coming back from down 14 in the final 2 minutes. But overall, like, handicap the Ravens, they're big favorites. I don't like the 3.5 number. I have them at minus 10.5 right now. I bought them all the way up. Like, I am all over the Ravens.
The only thing I'll say is the biggest thing that I feel about with this game is, and I'm not, and before I make this statement, I am not saying it in a negative way. I think Taylor Swift mania has gone way past where it needs to be, because people are now convinced that the Chiefs are going to win because the NFL wants Taylor Swift there to sell tickets and all this stuff. I keep
hearing better use the mute button, yo. I'm not seeing this shit.
And I'm like, please stop. That is not happening.
The funny thing is, though, Zach, with that is that she won't be there anyway, because she'll
exactly
be on tour.
That. But then on top of that, I'm sitting there last week. If there was anything that the NFL was going to pull a script for and make it a dramatic thing, it would have been for the Bills to come back in that game after that fumble out of the end zone. That had it written all over it. So if we want to talk about NFL script, shut up. Stop talking about that stuff. I was just
saying this earlier this show. Use the mute button more. We don't need these opinions on our timelines.
Yes, we don't. And I was telling one of my friends earlier this week, like, yes, in some sports, it can seem how things can seem like they're rigged. You do not understand how difficult it is to rig something like football when there are 22 players involved in every single play, and then other people involved out of that. It's impossible. No, it's not like this. It is a human sport. There are mistakes. This is what's going to happen. However, there's nothing in me that looks at the way this game stacks up, and given Thuney being out and then Isaiah Pacheco being banged up, how is this offense going to keep up with the Ravens? I just don't see it. You have comparable defenses and one offense that's far and away better than the other. Like, it just,
and like,
it doesn't look
the tackling
good.
is a great strategy against the Bills, who aren't very good at tackling and are super banged up. If you test the tackling of the Ravens linebackers, you will lose. Like,
This is their best chance to go to the Super Bowl that they've ever had since Lamar Jackson took over. And if they don't make it, I think this is one of the few instances for a select few teams where if they don't make it to the Super Bowl at this point, you could look at it as not being a success, because like it's a layup at this point. Like, you have the ability to just walk in there.
Yeah, for me, the thing that gets me the most is, like, I understand why you feel the way you do, Tony. I really do. I think that it's really hard, though, to like just take it out of my head that Patrick Mahomes is the opposing quarterback, and like, I understand you account for that, right? Because he can't catch the ball for these guys. They caught the ball for him this past week, especially. You don't know if that's going to happen. Another thing that people are really, I think it's an underrated thing, is Kadarius Toney might play.
Wait, I may have just seen him declared out.
I thought
was he declared out?
I thought he was.
Yeah,
declared
Adam
out.
Schefter 56 minutes ago ruled out.
Okay, good. So never
That's
mind.
good
So,
for them.
so the Chiefs
They will line up correctly.
right. So the Chiefs immediately have a better chance.
They have plus 0.5 to their score because they
Right,
won't
yeah.
get points taken away.
Exactly. So that you know what, that line feels a little bit better now with him actually being out. That helps. He might be one of the few NFL players who being out is actually going to boost the odds of the team.
I'm sure there's some other ones.
Yeah, well, he's quite literally cost them so much. It's almost kind of hilarious at this point that they're even in contention. But it's beside the point. But it's really hard to just look at it's really hard to look at the Chiefs and say that they can compete with this Ravens team. But again, the part of it that everyone has to contend with is how much credit do you just automatically give Patrick Mahomes by default, right? And again, he can only do so much. I think that this game should be as close as the line, like it should be because of him, and I trust him that much. But again, the Ravens defense could make this completely impossible. Especially like they could legitimately shut down their receivers to the point where they just can't do anything.
Not to mention, the Chiefs' defense is banged up as hell, and
it is
we have the
up.
Fucking MVP is playing on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, that's the one thing for both Detroit and Kansas City is unfortunately for both underdogs are pretty banged up as far as like overall roster health outside of injured reserve, like because like that's where if you want to get down to it, yes, San Francisco has some injured reserve members, whatever.
Yeah.
Like that, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that like for the most part, the Chiefs have like a good portion of their defense questionable. The Lions have a good part of their offense questionable. The underdogs have quite a hill to climb on top of being underdogs. It's not just, hey, you guys are the 3 seed. It's you guys have to fight over some adversity with not being at full strength as well.
Yeah, both of these teams have a lot that they have to overcome. And I think, like you said, I think it is fair to say that the Chiefs have more to overcome, despite not being, they are obviously down, but they're not as much of an underdog as the Lions are. They just have so much that has to go right. Like Mahomes has to be himself, which is pretty much a given, you assume. But the receivers have to come and play. The defense has to be able to hold up with the offensive line injuries to like that. Their offensive line has to hold up because as much as Mahomes can break out of stuff and run around and do everything, like especially a guy like Madubuike coming in from the inside with the season he's had, like that's a huge issue. Like,
and so we saw what the Chiefs did last week. Madubuike just jogged my memory. Patrick Mahomes, I don't even know if he was pressured once the entire game.
It didn't feel like it.
That is going to be materially different this time around, right? Like, so not only did we get the outlier of all of the shitty receivers catching every single deep pass thrown their way, but we got the Chiefs' offensive line, which has surrendered a lot of pressure this year, played a perfect game. Neither of those things should be projected going forward.
Yeah,
right?
You can't assume them. Yeah, you cannot assume them to happen. Yeah,
and then the Ravens. I was gonna say the Ravens are also getting Marlon Humphrey and Mark Andrews back as well.
Right. Like again, the Mark Andrews thing, like it's nice to have. They don't even really need it, which is the sad part.
I would say the Ravens are a weird team because like if OBJ shows up, that is an absolutely like added advantage for them. But like it's not like they have a bunch of depth there. It's like Zay Flowers is going nuts, but like it's just they have more reliability. Like it's not from a depth perspective, it's from a reliability. Like I'm not worried about the Ravens wide receivers dropping them as much, but I also can't tell you half of their names. It's just a completely different story.
I'm happy with Rashad Bateman, Odell Beck, Zay Flowers, and Nelson Aguilar. Man, that'll get the job done for me.
But it's more so like I said, if OBJ shows up, that's a big thing because he's been very quiet in quite a few games this year. Zay Flowers has been incredible. Could not have asked for more from him. But then it's like, okay, now you're getting to the part where it's like, Rashad Bateman and Nelson Aguilar, they're doing their part. It's not like you were expecting them to be the primary pieces or some even secondary pieces of this team. Maybe Bateman, but like the wide receivers showing up is probably the biggest thing for the Ravens because Lamar Jackson's always played this great. It's just getting him and the wide receivers in tune on this offense to finally get everything clicked together. And they've got it without having to have like a top 3 trio in the NFL, which is incredible.
Right. I think that's an underrated part of this discussion, and really Lamar's season in general is realistically, Zay obviously has been phenomenal, but he's a rookie receiver. Rashad Bateman has been hit or miss. OBJ's been hit or miss, honestly. He's had some really nice games and some other games where he didn't really even need to be out there. Isaiah Likely, who is a really talented
Is
player, but was
awesome.
not
I
a
love
full-time
Isaiah
starter
Likely.
until, Mark Andrews went down, right? Like, he's doing this with weapons that, like, if you inserted a normal quarterback, like say a good, like even a good quarterback.
Here, I will throw it out there. If you put Tua in this offense, it's a disaster.
Well, yeah,
but
yeah.
It's like something like that. You're talking about a quarterback who, like, it's of the you put like it's comparable to say put Mahomes in this offense, and he's probably can do something similar. But like that's your list. Like it's so few quarterbacks to where like even dropping off to put a Brock Purdy in here, and it's probably not going well at all. Like that's and it's crazy.
It's really ridiculous because I think the thing that also happens is like the reason why Lamar is so difficult to me is because yes, his passing offenses in the past have been predictable and kind of easy to stop for the most part, especially against teams that have the ability to take Mark Andrews away and things like that. Now it's not as easy because the passing offense is just flushed out. It actually makes sense. But now also the way he's running, where he's not just like taking off running full speed and just like crashing into the ground, like he slow plays it. Like he can just make a play that doesn't work just work because of who he is as a player. Like it's just so hard. Like you can cover guys perfectly, but if you cover everyone perfectly, guess who doesn't probably have eyes on the quarterback? All the defenders covering everybody. So then he just scoots out and gets you a free first down. Like it just the people again. We talked about it a little bit ago. There is not a formula for this team. The formula is you hope what happened with the Steelers game early in the year where the receivers drop every conceivable pass. Like that's pretty much what you're banking on if you want to actually like shut them down truly. Because if Lamar has open receivers, he's not going to run the football, so he's going to throw it to them. They would have to drop them. Like that's kind of honestly probably your best bet.
It's literally the exact thing that's happening to Mahomes this year.
Yeah,
it's not that Mahomes has gotten worse. It's that his receivers aren't catching anything.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we don't want to do that.
It's the exact same. It's exactly what you're saying. You hope that the Chiefs hope that they walk in there and they don't catch a single thing. That's your hope, and that's probably a path to victory. But the likelihood of that after seeing the opposite happen for most of the season, it's just not likely.
Yeah, not like this. Yeah. No. So another thing I want to mention before we kind of wrap this up, we can do our picks for this game. We can jump into the Lions-Niners game. I think the sad part is like, let's say both passing offenses, right? Because we know Mahomes this is more likely to happen to him with his receivers, but this is another thing to consider. Let's say both receiving groups just refuse to catch the football, like they're not making tough catches, they're dropping opportunities down the field. The advantage is still the Ravens then, because they have a quarterback who can just be like, all right, my guys are making plays, I'll just bide my time until there's a rushing lane, I'm just going to get 10, 15 yards. Like it legitimately. There's not really many
excellent run game.
Exactly, they do. Like Edwards has been great. Now you'd love to have more health at running backs. So Dalvin Cook isn't getting freaking carries, but whatever, and that's whatever. But
poor J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah, right. Like he would be really fun in a wide open. Like whatever. Ultimately, there's just so much that favors the Ravens offensively versus what favors the Chiefs. Like there's so many more avenues for them to have success, even if there's an issue here or an issue there. They take away this, they take away that. It is really hard not to favor them very heavily on offense. And then the defenses, yes, this is probably the best, like, especially if it was fully healthy, best defense that we've had in the Mahomes era, right? But one, they're not fully healthy, and the Ravens defense is not exactly worse. Sure. In fact, they're better, in my opinion, at least in the opinions of most people. It does feel like it's really hard to overcome. So,
on the defensive piece, I'm going to try to filibuster here as I pull up this data, but sure. The Ravens defense has the best DVOA of like any team in the past like 20 years or something, and so like
it's something insane.
I've got it up now. I can just sorting 1 second.
Live research on
the podcast.
Live research on the podcast.
Oh yeah. So the Chiefs come in at a nice respectable 7th.
Yes.
With -5%, which is like, quality defense. Ravens first, -23.3. They we are talking just truly
astronomical levels,
rare, impossibly great level of defense, and they did it against an incredibly difficult schedule where they've played a ton of playoff teams and they've had so much success against all of them. Like we're talking about like allowing 6 points to the Lions. We're talking about them just
they did play the
allowing
Lions.
19
Crap.
to the 49ers, 19 to the Dolphins. Like, this is an elite defense.
So literally, the Chiefs is the only team they have left to beat to be like, look, we are better than everybody.
They would have slaughtered the entirety of the upper echelon of the NFL if they beat this team easily as well. Like, completely annihilated the rest of the NFL.
And that's why I want to at the end. I would love to see Ravens Lions Super Bowl, but that's why I would like to see the Ravens win, because I don't remember the last time we've seen a team this dominant actually go through and actually finish it off.
Yeah. I do have a slight fear that if the Ravens win, we might not have a competitive Super Bowl. But the Chiefs would guarantee a game, right? But no, I want to see this Ravens team finish the job, because
I do.
We're gonna look back in like a year and just be like, how did we not constantly talk about this juggernaut of a team that existed all year?
Yeah, for sure.
Because everybody was too focused on the Eagles and 49ers.
Yeah, guilty.
Yeah, fair enough. All I have to say about that and how much of a juggernaut they are is 2-0. That's all I have to say about that. It's fake. It's fake. Don't.
Well, you didn't have to play
all time, and then
you didn't have to play.
Game in which the Ravens rested everybody.
I know, and we still made it hard. So that's
and you still made it to the playoffs.
Yeah, we certainly were there for a little bit.
Hey, just like us.
Yeah, it's fair. We actually somehow we came out looking better somehow. Zach, I'm sorry.
At least you didn't have to play in -20. So
that's fair. I would have rather played negative. I would have rather played in the snowstorm, and we would have had a chance then. Maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not going to rehash that for right now. Let's get into the Lions-Niners game.
Did we make picks? Did we?
We didn't
we
have
didn't
picks. Sorry.
Yeah.
I know it's pretty clear. I think who we're picking. But go ahead, Tony. What do you have for the score?
So I've got Ravens. I'm making this up on the spot. I didn't actually make score predictions. I just know that I think they're going to win by a lot. So let's go Ravens 29, Chiefs 16.
Ooh, okay. Interesting score. I have to check if that's scoregami. That might be a scoregami play.
It sounds like it could be, but it's also low scoring enough where it's probably not.
That's true, yeah. What do you think, Zach?
I'm going to say Ravens 33, Chiefs 20.
Okay. I'll say Ravens 31, Chiefs 24. I'm going to give the Chiefs a little bit of credit that they can at least make this a game, because it's hard for me not to.
The weather's actually nice this weekend around here, so.
Yeah, I'm still going to have the Ravens cover in that situation at -4. So
they really should have swapped those lines.
They probably should. Lions-Niners. You can already see my headline. This is what I want to happen. I'm going to talk about it as if it's going to happen, but I want nothing more than the Lions to win this game. In fact, I would just say that if they don't win this game, I will be more disappointed about that than anything that happened to the Steelers this year as a Steelers fan. Because the Niners thing, first of all, they shouldn't be in this game. The fact that they won that Packers game is truly mind-boggling to me. The way that
is a Joe Barry masterpiece.
It was
Rip.
Yeah, Rip for sure.
He has since been fired.
He has since been relieved of his duties, thankfully. It really helps my Jordan Love narrative going into next year. I'll tell you that much. Although he definitely threw the game.
Easier to win MVP when you're a 1 or 2 seed.
Right? Yeah, seriously. But I want nothing more than this Lions team to win. Now, I understand why the 49ers are favored by a touchdown to a certain degree. Maybe not that badly, but I understand it. They've been really difficult to stop most of the time this year. I will say, and this is kind of my opening statement on this game, if they play the same game they played last week, they will lose to the Lions.
Oh, yeah.
100%. There was a good 3.5 quarters worth of game from Brock Purdy that was just not – it was at times not NFL quarterback play. I'm just going to be honest. The people were saying about how he won, so he had the game-winning drive. I understand that he showed up at the end of that game.
Why did they need a game-winning drive, people?
Exactly. You don't have to preach to me, Tony. We know. But for me, he did his job at the end of the game. I understand that. It's not like he wasn't the reason they won that game, obviously, but he did help them at the end of that game. He did show up and make a couple throws that he needed to make. But there was a lot of that game. And granted, it was in conditions. I don't know what the conditions are for the game. I didn't check beforehand. But if he plays that level of game again, I understand the Lions defense has had its struggles, all that stuff. They will not win. And I think that is more of a possibility than people think it is because of the way he finished that game. I think people are just dismissing a lot of his performance and moving on just expecting it not to happen again. And I don't think it's as easy to say that it's gonna just go back to being the efficiency that he was playing at before.
If he plays like that again, he's going to get somebody killed by Kirby Joseph.
Yeah, that's another thing
yeah.
for sure. Yeah, he's
this
definitely
is like these teams hit hard, and I could see like an ejection on a bad
the one thing that has not been mentioned yet is the best part of this game is we finally get Deebo Samuel versus CJ Gardner-Johnson, and I cannot wait. I cannot wait. It has been quite a season of online jabs back and forth.
Yeah,
it's going to be wonderful.
So I've said it a couple times, like these lines should have been switched. I don't understand making the 49ers a full touchdown favorite, and I really don't understand the line staying there all week. But the way I see it, the 49ers are a more talented team. They have a slightly better offense. I mean, during the regular season, they had a better offense for sure. Their defense is beatable, especially in the run game. That's David Montgomery's music. But the main thing I see is that these are both very high octane offenses capable of scoring anytime they touch the ball. The difference that matters most to me in this game is you like just pure foils of each other at head coach, where Shanahan is so like obsessed with his scheme and his offense and perfection on that side that he like neuters his offense when he gets into the playoffs. He neuters his team because he just I don't know what it is. If you have the best offense in the league, you should let it rip always. But he like the drive that I think everybody knows about, but getting the ball with 4 minutes left in the first half. Opportunity to go drive, you're up 7-6 at this time. They bleed 4 minutes off the clock. 11 plays, 45 yards. They play for the field goal. They either miss or get the field goal blocked. And it didn't turn into points for Green Bay or anything, but they could have gotten 7 so easily, and they just chose not to.
Did they get the ball back at half? At the second half?
They did. Yeah, I think
they did.
But even then, you have a chance to not only double dip.
Exactly. Go for the double dip. They ended up going 3 and out, punting, and then going down a touchdown because the Packers took advantage of that situation. But so you have a coach who is actively going to hinder his team's ability to score points. Somebody, I want to say it was the Athletic Football Show, and it just has stuck in my head. But Shanahan is so afraid of the opposing team scoring 3 or scoring 7 or 3 or whatever, that he is unwilling to go and try for 7 points on his own team. Like, he is afraid of playing football in the playoffs. Dan Campbell, on the other hand, embraces this shit. He wants every single probability win point. Like, he wants to, he'll be going for onside kicks. He'll be going for shit, right? Like, he'll be going for it on every 4th down. You get the ball with 2 minutes left, he is trying to score so fast. That is where the difference is to me. When you have 2 teams that are capable of putting up points, and one team really wants to every time they touch the ball, and the other one is afraid of doing so, advantage the Lions, right? They are going to have a material advantage just in the most important aspects of play calling and game management. And I think that matters so much more than people are giving it credit for.
And it's something we're on the same page, Tony, because something I've been thinking about all week, and really since we've known this matchup was coming, and it's pretty much what you said, is Kyle Shanahan as a play caller, especially in those situations where there's 2 minutes, 4 minutes left in the half. Are you aggressive, or do you just try to get in range to add some points before half? He is all brakes, no gas, and Dan Campbell is all gas, no brakes. And I think in the playoffs, especially when you're dealing with teams of these calibers, the guy who's willing to take every inch, who wants every single opportunity he can get, who pushes the envelope as far as he possibly can. And I like to think of it too with Campbell, because people always talk about the probabilities and all this stuff. That is true. They tend to go for things that are like the actual right decision mathematically. In my head, I think Campbell's just like, let's just fucking let's do it. He's not like, it's not like this calculation happening. He's just like, I want points. Give me points right now. I don't care if it's 4th and 8. Just give me points. Like, that's how he plays, and that's how he coaches. And I think, like you said, in a game that isn't as separate, like the teams are not as separated as the line suggests, in my opinion, especially with the most recent evidence we have of these two teams. that's going to end up mattering. Now, could it end up blowing up in his face? Sure. Maybe he gives up a bunch of opportunities by going for 4th down, and then the Niners have good field position. They take advantage. Like, all that is possible. But to me, especially when you have an offensive coordinator like Ben Johnson, who's been able to push the right buttons with Jared Goff at quarterback, who has a run game that is crafted to be able to handle the power stuff with Montgomery and getting Jahmyr Gibbs in space and all these different ways you can attack a Niners defense that just isn't very good against the run. Let's just be honest with you. Like, they're not very good against the run. I think that he is going to have the right calls for those situations. I think he's going into this game knowing, like, this is going to be a huge game, not only for the Lions season, but and for their careers, but his career, right? He's going to be a head coach next year. We assume it's with the Commanders at this point, right? Like we talked about that earlier in the show, Zach. This is where he can cement a legacy for himself, not just for going forward, but for this city and for the city of Detroit, being the guy that got them to the Super Bowl on offense, right? Being the play caller for that team. And Campbell can do the same thing by being himself and not shrinking in that moment. And I have no concerns about him shrinking in the moment. I do, like you said, Tony, have concerns about Shanahan shrinking in the moment, as he's done time and time again, unfortunately.
So you're telling me that Mike McDaniel has Shanahan syndrome in the second half of the season?
It's a little different to me, but
a little different. No, it's absolutely different.
Some of that.
Yeah.
No, I agree with everything that you guys have been saying, and more so because I think that the Lions are being vastly underestimated in this game because of how dominant the 49ers are perceived from the season. Let's not pretend like Tampa Bay played a close game last week. They didn't. They scored a touchdown with 4 minutes left to make it 23 and like 31-23. Yeah, okay. That's 8 points, but it was 31-17 until then. And it wasn't like the Lions were going to let that up. So like they have a fantastic team. The defense is solid. The offense is firing on all cylinders. Khalif Raymond is playing this week. It looks like Laporte is still out there.
I don't know when this news dropped, but I have the injury report up right now. He did get ruled out, unfortunately.
He was questionable the other day.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is a little upsetting, but they still have all the pieces to beat San Francisco at what they're not good at, and that's where maybe he hasn't been as bad as 7th round pick, but Brock Purdy has absolutely shown that he is human this year as opposed to last year. And there are ways to fluster him. And given what you guys were just saying about the unrelenting, I want this more than you do from Dan Campbell and the Lions, they're not going to let up. They're going to be going. You're talking about a team that is in a conference championship game for the first time in franchise history. There is no team more motivated to. I don't believe that the Lions have.
Did they make it 1 year? I want to say like 90.
If it was a long ass time ago.
I
have no idea.
Since the NFL merger, I believe they have never been to an NFC championship game because they have never won a divisional round game.
Huh. I could have sworn. No, go ahead. Keep going, Zach.
But
I'm trying to remember. They may have played one of the teams. They may have lost the NFC Championship to one of the teams that beat the Bills in the Super Bowl in the early '90s, but I don't know that for sure.
Here I'm pulling it up right now. But it's just
nobody on that team today has record
91. You're right. Yeah, they did. They lost to the Washington team at that time.
To the Washington.
So they've only been once in franchise history, so I was wrong on that. That's my bad. Man, I put that in my article. I need to edit that.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
Can't get them all right.
Yeah. So but you have a fan base that is hungry, that is starving for success, and I don't care if it's in San Francisco. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. They will be traveling to get to there, and they will be behind this team. But it's also the fact that you have a majority of this roster that's been around for this entire rebuild. They want it more than anything, not just the fans. They've been there for the whole growth. Like, yes, they're going to be playing lights out the entire time, 60 minutes, where you have a San Francisco team that's going to their third conference championship in 3 years, second, hopefully looking for their second Super Bowl in 5 years. I just there's more opportunity, like you guys said, for Shanahan and the 49ers to get jaded, whereas you have a team for the Lions that has not ever really been in this situation or opportunity before. And while that could lead to inexperience, yes, it's also going to lead to extreme motivation to be like, nah, it's our time. It's time for us. I said Ravens and 49ers to begin the playoffs, and I am absolutely fine if the Lions are the ones to spoil that and make it Ravens Lions.
Yeah, me as well. Because the other thing, and I've talked about this with some friends of mine who understand like the Brock Purdy situation and stuff, and like I just don't want to hear the narratives if they make the Super Bowl or if they win it by some miracle, because I know it's the credit's not going to be given to Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and Kyle Shanahan and all. Like it's going to be Brock Purdy's the champion. He's Tom Brady. It's going to be that conversation all offseason, and I just can't do it. Like if the Lions aren't the ones to do it, like. I know, Tony.
How many times am I going to say that shit?
You know, Tony. I know.
I know those people. You don't have to see it.
I know. But you get my point.
You're allowed to filter down to reasonable content.
I know. We've all dealt with that. We know how that works. But I just don't want it to be a thing, right? Like I want the NFL to be more sane if possible. I know it isn't going to happen, but generally speaking, I think most of America is on the side of the Lions. I would assume. It's kind of hard not to be unless you're obviously a Niners fan, or else you just really are just about like better team should win, whatever. Like outside of that, I think most people want the Lions to come away with this. And I think the disappointing thing though, and we talked about it with our Ravens Chiefs game predictions, is I almost don't care who makes this, like who wins this game in terms of like the Super Bowl, because if the Ravens win it, and if they beat the Chiefs, I really don't think either of these teams are going to have much of a chance against the Ravens. I know the Niners played them once already. Maybe that's good or bad. I don't really know if it helps them or hurts them, honestly.
They both have.
But
both got
that's true. That's right. Yeah, I was forgetting about that because I remember watching the game and I'm like, what the hell is going on?
That was that was the first game of the season.
It was the Lions and the Ravens split.
Yeah.
The Lions Chiefs game was week 1, which we all know that game was the Kadarius Toney's start to the season that kind of made us go, oh no, it might not work out too well. But no, I think that, again, the Lions have a better chance than the line certainly suggests. And I think that even if we ultimately don't pick them here, I want them to win for sure. Take that for what it's worth. Because we have only these 2 games to talk about, we spent a lot of time talking about this. Is there any other things you guys want to talk about with the game specifically? Or are you guys ready to do picks?
I do want to, sorry, I do want to call out real quick, like, Zach brought it up earlier. The Lions are relatively banged up, which throws a little bit of rain on this parade. But Jonah Jackson is a huge loss to not have out there. Now, of course, I don't think the strength of the 49ers is their interior, but they do have like Javon Hargrave, and that's scary. Other guys, they're all off the injury report, but like really worried about Frank Ragnow with his ankle, toe, knee, back injury that kept him out of practice for 2 days this week. He's gonna play, but
that's a unique one. Ankle, toe, knee, back. I don't have one of those.
They had him doing the knees.
They had him doing like the head, shoulder, knees, and toes dance, trying to tell him where the
he's Teron Armstead.
Pretty much, yeah. Just a longer list of injuries.
My body hurt.
And then also like Josh Reynolds and Sam Laporta both banged up. Obviously going to go, but both banged up. Alex Anzalone, like, shouldn't matter, but everybody knows Shanahan's putting the scope on a linebacker, and it could be him. So like the injuries play a role, and I feel like we haven't done enough to say like the 49ers are materially much better. Like offensively, weapons wise, like
for sure,
similar style quarterback where they're gonna elevate. It's fair to say about both of those guys this season, but they're gonna elevate a little bit, but they're also going to let their guys go to work, and the guys that are going to work for the 49ers are better than the guys going to work for the Lions.
I just trust Jared Goff more than I trust Brock Purdy.
There's that, and we get to our score predictions, you'll see that I still think that coaching advantage matters a lot.
Yes.
But I do want to call out that like the 49ers...
Which is a wild statement when we talk about coaching advantage, because we are talking about like some of the best coaches in the league still.
Listen, that's the sad part, is that the coaching disadvantage, and we all think it's in the Niners' disadvantage, is like almost on purpose. Like it's not like they can't do something else, or the Cal can't just say, listen, this is the Super Bowl on the line, guys. Like we got to just go as hard as we can. it just isn't in his DNA. I think I just
Yeah.
don't think it's how he
And
perceives the game and how he likes to do
like I
things.
said, we get to see Deebo Samuel play this week, but it's big to say that, like, look, that was their only major injury coming into the playoffs, and the only major like absence. They get their only major absence back, both the Ravens and San Francisco. So it's just kind of like, man, I wish the underdogs had better odds with their health. But at the end of the day, I mean, probably a reason why the Ravens and 49ers are in the spot that they are at right now because of the relatively good health that they maintain throughout the entire season.
It does.
And their talent.
It always helps for sure. Let's get into our picks here. We can get out of here, Tony. What do you have as your score prediction for this game? Do you have the Lions having that advantage? Do you think that they're able to take this one?
Yeah, so I feel like I need to put a disclaimer out there because it's like pretty well known at this point. I do love the Lions, right? Like my girlfriend is a big Lions fan. A lot of my friends from college are all big Lions fans. So I have a rooting interest. I have a vested rooting interest in the Detroit Lions. I will be wearing Lions gear tomorrow. I feel like also last week showed that I'm not just going to pick with my heart, right? Like I'm going to tell you what I think. I thought the Bills would lose. I didn't want the Bills to lose. The Bills lost. I do think that coaching matters a whole hell of a lot. Not so much that, like, if Kyle Shanahan were like an average game manager, then I'd probably be picking them by like 10 points, honestly.
You're just average at that stuff, yeah.
But I think that he is like a net negative. He takes away value from a team in the way that he manages games. And Dan Campbell is such an overwhelming net positive in that direction. I do have the Lions winning. I don't feel like super great about it, but it feels like something that is firmly possible. And I haven't seen them choke because they haven't had the opportunity to choke. I have seen the 49ers choke a lot of things away. And so, yeah, I'm going to go 31-28. I do think it's going to be high scoring, but not like over the top. And then I really do believe the Lions have a damn good shot to take this one home.
All right, Zach, what do you think?
Yeah, so I too will be picking the Lions. And again, before this, at the beginning of the playoffs, if you would ask me what I thought the Super Bowl was, I would have said Ravens, San Francisco, only because I did not think the Lions were going to get this far. I thought something Detroit was going to happen.
I picked them against them round one.
and yeah. But there's just something about the added motivation of doing something that they've never done before with the person that they have in front of them leading them, because that's the biggest thing that can't be taken away from the Lions is that Dan Campbell is an incredible head coach. Whether you want to give him flack for what he had before and when he was hired, but he has proven that he was the right man for this job because he has turned a place that was perennially awful into a contender. With the assistance of his front office and assistant coaches and all of that. So I just there's so much more on the line. It feels like for Detroit overall that they just have so much more fire coming into this game and pull this one off. Would I like to see? I would not like to see San Francisco win. I would not at all. I would actually like to see it fall flat in their face and have them have to actually make some sort of actual like major changes to address the fact that they have a roster that can win. They're just misusing a lot of talent when they get to the postseason. Like something else has to happen. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, I'm going to say that Detroit wins 30-27.
I'm gonna keep your little comment there in the back pocket. That's something I want to revisit in the off season and just hear what your thoughts are on like what changes that need to be made this off season.
I think the biggest thing is the fact that Kyle Shanahan has gotten away with quarterback mismanagement for so long that eventually it has to come back to bite him in the butt.
Let's remember that for an episode. I want to double click into that. That's going to be an interesting discussion.
We will talk about that, yeah, when we get to the off season. So, guys, that means we have a clean sweep.
Oh no!
Upset pick.
Shit!
I'm sorry. I don't want to.
Detroit. We didn't mean to curse you.
Listen, I don't want to do it.
What's the moon phase? Everybody, look up the moon phase.
We do need to know the moon phase for sure for this Lions team. I just again, part of it is just me wanting to will it into existence, right? Where like I just want this Lions team to get here because you don't get many opportunities to do this, right? The Niners have had their shot at this. They blew it with Jimmy Garoppolo. Like that's who their Super Bowl quarterback was. Jared Goff has been here before. People forget that. Like I understand that he was a little bit more along for the ride than he probably is right now, but he's been here before. The Lions may be inexperienced, but they have somebody at the most important position who does know what it's like to be here. He knows
And
what
been
it's
to a
like.
Super Bowl.
Yeah, he knows what it's like to get to the Super Bowl. And granted, he didn't really get off the bus on that in that Super Bowl, nor did the entire Rams offense. But that's beside the point. They're playing the like high end defenses of the Patriots, like the late Patriots area, so it's tough. But again, I just think that overall, oh no, he's upset. No, I think he's mad at me for picking the Lions and making it a sweep. No, I'm gonna give the Lions the edge here, 28-27. I think it's gonna be like one of those like last minute, like they come down, they get it. Niners can't quite get a drive going. The Brock Purdy magic ends fully for this year at least. And yeah, we probably get some insane CJ Gardner-Johnson tweet directly after the game. Probably some sort of like it's gonna get nasty during that game, I think too.
You're just a running back.
Like, oh jeez. If that quote comes out, it's over. For like he might.
Told you I locked you up.
He might get so embarrassed he might never play in the sport again by Lamar if he says that's a Lamar. But no, anyway.
Yeah,
I'm going to pick the Lions to
the one thing I did want to add to any conversations you guys had earlier about coaching is I will cry tears of just hilarity if Chip Kelly finds his way into the Seattle Seahawks organization.
That was the one I was thinking of.
Yes. Yes, that has been a massive rumor that has been going around that Chip Kelly's
as an OC.
I
was only hearing OC.
Okay. I saw head coaching rumors at
terrible, but better.
Yeah,
because I guess the assumption is that they still have Pete Carroll to do any sort of like actual like roster management if they went that route. Because I don't know why you would absolutely hand your anything over to Chip Kelly after that disaster.
Well, I mean, they'd welcome him back to the division, I'm sure.
That would be the most wild name for a college to NFL jump, in my opinion, outside of Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, well, that's fine. But no, that's our picks for this week. We will be back probably next week to preview the Super Bowl a little bit, to talk more about how this is going to work, because we obviously will have that gap.
Give you guys some Pro Bowl games skills competition updates.
There you go.
See who won the event.
Flag football.
Yeah.
Dude, I don't know. The Pro Bowl just, in my opinion,
who was the number one quarterback? Woo!
It just doesn't exist in my mind at this point. Like I just kind of block it out from my mind. I just don't want to deal with it or think about it. So, which I kind of probably, like Tony suggests, we do with literally everything else that we have to deal with or hear about. It's just block it out. Literally block it. Be like, nope, we don't want to deal with it.
The Pro Bowl was dead when it moved away from Hawaii.
Interesting take. Fair enough.
It was dead after that one hit on Brian Mormon.
Yeah, they were like, we can't do this anymore. We can't do it anymore.
It's like it peaked.
Yeah, no, but that'll do it for us this week, and we will be back in some capacity, most likely next week, to talk about things. And we get an appearance. There he is.
Hey.
There it is. There we go.
The boyo.
Way to go, Cash. Good job.
Good job. All right, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for joining us again, and hopefully, if you're rooting for the favorites, one of them I'm happy to win. The other one, not so much. That's all I'll say about that. See you guys.